Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update segment for the 17th of March 2023. My goodness, I have more tabs to get through than you could poke a hairy stick at, so I better go quickly. Okay, right. Opening gambits, usual caveats, inaccurate propaganda. Does Russia produce the same sort of figures? No. These are the Ukrainian figures for the Russian losses for the day before. They are indicatively useful, in my opinion, and I think pretty accurate recently. So 760 liquidated personnel, say the Ukrainians of the Russians. That is down about 300 from yesterday. The last few days have been really, really high, or yesterday was particularly high. So it's not surprising that you're going to come down from there at some point. However, 760 is still a big number. It's still way above the average of the whole war. 2 tanks, that's far fewer than previously. 13 APCs is pretty high. 13 artillery systems is high as well. 1 MLRS. 1 helicopter. There was rumors of that yesterday, and that seems to have come out now. 7 vehicles and 1 piece of special equipment. That might be radar, might be electronic warfare, could be any number of things. I think the number of note there is 13 artillery systems. There have been this consistent attrition of artillery pieces over the last week or so, and I think that's going to hurt the Russians. And I don't know whether there is an explicit counter battery. There are rumors that they are, trying to do some counter battery work. There's evidence that that's been happening around Kherson, and I would assume they're going to be trying their hardest to hit artillery around Bakhmut and Avdiivka in places where the Ukrainians are struggling at the moment. Anyway, useful figures, not the highest, but also not the lowest. And that helicopter Ka-52, there was talk about that yesterday. The rumors were out, and then it seems to be the case. Here is some video footage of 3. The reason I've included this is because recently, oops. Oh, goodness me, fingers and sound. Right, the reason I'm including this is because this is 3 MLRS in one sort of video. And this plays into the claims, the numbers that have come out in the last week, which I think one day there might have been something like 7 MLRS taken out. And you're thinking, goodness me, that's a lot of MLRS. So multiple launch rocket systems are pretty annoying pieces of equipment for the Ukrainians, and they also cook off. So these are the ones that fire unguided missiles, unguided rockets at the enemy in quite large barrages, and 3 taken out in one kind of general area is pretty devastating for the Russians there, and you can see them all cooking off and whatnot. So that video just goes into detail of that, yeah, just trying to give some evidence for the numbers that are provided. This is a letter to the EU. Ukrainian Defense Minister Reznikov said that Ukrainian forces were firing an average of 110,000 155 mil artillery rounds per month. Ukraine will need to fire more rounds for its spring offensive than for defending. 110,000, given a 30-day month, is about, 3,500 a day. That's nothing. I mean, the Russians apparently at the peak were firing 60,000. They're more like 20,000, maybe even less now. Some saying fewer than that. Could be down to sort of 7,000. Not really sure. They're differing numbers. But 3,500 is not clearly enough, especially as it says here, to do an offensive. And that's a real problem. So this is one of the biggest issues for military aid for the Ukrainian army is ammunition, shell hunger. So artillery ammunition hunger. Reznikov is very openly admitting this, and they are appealing to the EU. As a result, the EU and the US and everyone are trying their damnedest to get together and produce ammunition. I'd say get together. The EU has got together to say, right, we're going to give a load of money for ammunition. We also need to produce this. We need to get military production. These up. The US is doing that. I showed you 24/7 activity in one particular manufacturer in Pennsylvania. I believe Australia and France are working together on this. So there's lots of activity going on with shell production. It's just, is there going to be enough? Interesting analysis by a German journalist in a German online publication. Russia is being attrited at such a rate that they may collapse before the end of the year, assuming the West delivers in time what we promised. War is a test of will and a test of logistics. So this is a German piece that I have done the Google Translate for. Now, I'll go through this article at greater length in an extra video later, but it does give you an account of how, or at least this guy thinks, that Russia will not be able to prevail in this war, and indeed that they will have some kind of collapse by October. They just aren't producing the tanks that they are needing. The number of tanks that the Russians are losing every single day is not replaceable in the current, with the current means that Russia has at their disposal. Whereas on the other hand, you could argue that Ukraine is getting upgraded all the time that Russia is getting degraded. So there's that asymmetry that's going on. Anyway, this is an account for how bad it is for the Russians. That's a very positive outlook for the Ukrainians, but it's not all happiness and roses for the Ukrainians, as according to many. The UK defence intelligence update, is pretty much drawing on, I can see, drawing on what the ISW was saying yesterday. In recent days, Russian Wagner Group forces have obtained footholds west of the Bakhmutka River in the center of the contested Donbass town of Bakhmut. Over the preceding week, the river had marked the front line. Ukrainian forces continue to defend the west of the town. However, more broadly across the front line, Russia is conducting some of the lowest rates of local offensive action that has been seen since at least January 2023. So this then go back to the German piece and think, well, actually, is there some kind of culmination? Are they struggling, etc., etc.? This is most likely because Russian forces have temporarily depleted and the deployed formation's combat power to such an extent that even local offensive actions are not currently sustainable. Russian leaders will likely seek to regenerate the offensive potential of the force once personnel and munition stocks are replenished. In the meantime, commanders will likely be forced to choose between carrying out offensive operations and conducting a credible defense of the full line. So, is this a Russian offense? Is this it? I keep saying this every single day. Is this it? If it is, it's not looking very good. And if it's not, where are they going to get the forces for the offensive? So this is where you start hearing rumors about 400,000 people being mobilized in Russia. Or if 400,000 people are being mobilized, what happened to the last 300,000 people that were mobilized? Plus, there's arguably more than that. Have they been attrited? Is that not enough? It's not looking good. Right. There has been so what has happened? So this would be possibly 2 days ago now, confirmed that Ukraine had demoted a commander who talked about horrific losses. So it's not all good, right, for Ukraine. Of course it's not. Ukraine are really, really suffering a lot. And in fact, one particular commander, Kupol, said of 500 men, 100 died and the rest were wounded. And he's come out, I think, in social media and newspapers talking about this. And he's been demoted, right? And the army said the numbers were exaggerated and he wasn't authorized to speak to media. Now, Andrew Perpetua, I've got a lot of time for Andrew Perpetua. I've interviewed him. Go and check out an interview with him on A Tippling Philosopher. So he's come out and said, this is really bad that he's been demoted. But you can't stifle this kind of free speech type thing. So we're watching bad leadership slowly fracture the military. If people aren't allowed to criticize, then things are going to get ugly. Public pressure has to be applied. Yermak and Zelensky are the ones that should be on the chopping block, not competent military leadership. At this point, Ukraine is removing its most competent leaders to prop up Zelensky's ego. This isn't the first time, and each time it has backfired and damaged Ukraine's ability to fight on the battlefield. It has to stop. And so the conversation goes on, and people disagree. And I'm going to fundamentally disagree with this, not so much in whether this guy had the wrong stats, right? Whether he was lying about things being terrible. I doubt he was. I think things are going to be really tough for the Ukrainians. However, if I publicly went to the newspapers and on social media and slagged off my boss, right, I would be sacked. And so would you. Like, you would be sacked. Like, think about it. If you went and said, God, our company's terrible, it's making losses, huge losses at the moment, and the decisions are absolutely useless from the top, like, you'd be like, you went to the papers and said that? Sorry, mate, but that's in your contract and you can't do that, and you're off ski, mate. That's malpractice or whatever. You'll be off. Okay, so that's a given. Now, imagine doing that in the armed forces, where that hierarchical command structure is super tight, right? You're going to get, I mean, I can't believe he's not been court-martialed, right? You are going to get demoted. There will be ramifications. Just this is the armed forces, right? You don't slag off your leadership in public. Now, not only that, this is the armed forces in war. You are in war. Things are tough. You got to be tight. Morale is really important. You start slagging off your commanders and saying things might actually be like that, but you've got to be considering things like morale, things like in the information space, things like propaganda, the enemy getting hold of what you're saying. All these things you can't go around shooting your mouth off, even if it is accurate, right? the this the information space in war is super important, and we have to understand that both sides are going to be, you know, spinning stuff, but they're spinning it for good reason from their point of view, right? You understand that, and so if this is unauthorized speech from this commander, then I can see why he's been demoted, and in fact, I think that's he's got off lightly. So I would disagree with Andrew Perpetua here. I know what he's saying, which is like you need to get this information out, and they need to understand that there are problems here, so that they can react in a proper way and make the better decisions. If they're not being held to account, then they will continue making bad decisions. I do get that as well. Like I understand that in the abstract, that makes sense. We're talking about just in general life, but in a war, in the armed forces, I think I think that's difficult. I think that's a really difficult situation, and I can fully understand why this guy's been demoted. Even if I like want to know what he's saying, and I'm interested in what he's saying, and I think it has value for me as a independent onlooker. Um, anyway, Russian security forces report that ammunition continues to be detonated at a warehouse in Rostov. So where's Rostov? Rostov is just very close to Mariupol, but on the Russian side. Now, this is an FSB building that has gone up in flames. It started with an explosion. So that, according to witnesses, there was an explosion first, and then stuff started happening. Also, next to ammunition, fuel with tanks is burning. Rescuers require body armor to protect themselves from debris. The fire covered more than 800 square meters. And in Rostov FSB building, so this is the Federal Security Bureau, is it? Eyewitnesses report that they heard an explosion before the fire started, and then that's yeah, not a good look. This is city of Rostov. Is this partisan? Looks pretty much like it could be. Uh, I think that's a very interesting event there, and that was picked up by mainstream media news yesterday as well. I mean, Telegraph was talking about this with the Ukraine the Latest podcast. That's one of their main things they started the podcast talking about was this fire. So, it has caused waves. And then Rostov round two says no report. So later in the evening, there's burning from in the distance. Not sure exactly where this is. Just it's a point of interest there. Talking about Russia on fire. Fire broke out in a steel structure plant in Leningrad. Emergency crews went to the village of Fedorovskaya, about 300 kilometers east of St. Petersburg, saying there was a threat of gas canisters exploding. So that kind of thing continues. And then we have ammo dump or ammo depot near Mariupol was hit yesterday. And this sort of thing is taking place on a daily basis. We don't get too much footage coming out of Mariupol of the destruction that is taking place. Okay, moving on to slightly different things. So this is just to a general like war maneuvers. The general staff have said that forcible passporting of the population of the temporarily occupied territory of Zaporizhia region continues. Thus, in the city of Tokmak, the so-called Russian occupation authorities, together with the representatives of the Russian FSB, threaten local citizens of Ukraine who refuse to obtain Russian passports with a deportation of their children to the eastern regions of Russia. So that appears to be a war crime again. Yeah, not good news there for those in Zaporizhia being forced into. I mean, this kind of liberation. Hey, we've come to liberate you. We're going to force you into our identity. Is that liberate? That's to do with freedom. Liberation. That's freedom, isn't it? So it's freedom to what? be who I want to be, think how I want to think. Oh no, it's not. Liberation appears to be doing exactly what the Russian imperialists want you to do and being exactly who you want them to be. Okay, an interesting view of liberation. Going on to military aid. Estonia to transfer more weapons, special equipment to Ukraine. The latest defense aid will include semi-automatic rifles, sniper rifles, scopes, binoculars, ammunition, individual and special equipment, patrol boats, thermal imaging scopes, and medical supplies. Interesting bunch of equipment there. There's some talk about how uh, there's lots of concentration on big equipment, but don't forget the little equipment, like the smaller stuff that they're absolutely craving for on the front line. So that's really important from Estonia. Latvia to send $74 million of military assistance to Ukraine. And Ukraine has already received aid from Latvia worth over $318 million. With the approval of the new budget, assistance will reach 392 million, which is more than 1% of the GDP of Latvia. So Latvia has given 1% of its GDP to Ukraine through aid. It's phenomenal. So when you look at other countries and say, oh, you know, you can look at the US and say they're doing the best, and they are in real terms. And without the US, Ukraine would be screwed. But when you look in terms of GDP or per capita, it's places like and yes, in real terms, this isn't as significant. Okay, so it's just different ways of looking at these things. But don't forget that Poland and these Baltic states, and for reasons of self-preservation, it's not like necessarily they're being the most moral. Yes, they are, but this is also they are the closest to this conflict, and they are the most under threat from Russia if Russia prevail. So there's a bit of self-preservation going on here, and I don't blame that at all, of course. But they are giving the most significant aid in terms of proportion of GDP or per capita, that kind of thing. Right. Poland will send 4 MiG-29 fighters in the coming days. So I think literally over the next few weeks, they're going to get 4 working MiG-29s, and there'll be more to follow. The rest of Poland's MiG-29s are being serviced and will all be made available to Ukraine in the future. This is absolutely fantastic, and I think that the Slovakians will follow suit as well. This is really good news. Ukraine will need these, and then there's going to be talk, I presume, about fitting these planes with munitions that NATO munitions that can be particularly useful. I think hopefully you're going to start seeing an uptick of. I'm hoping that one of the reactions to the Reaper drone being taken out is the US going, yeah, we're going to give you these missiles, we're going to give you these missiles, we're going to give you these missiles. Thank you very much, Russia. You've now given us permission to escalate. Germany is delivering a whole bunch of stuff. This is stuff they'd already pledged, but it's now been delivered. Volcano guided artillery rounds for the Panzerhützer 2000 self-propelled gun, ammunition for the 227mm M270 Mars multiple launch rocket system, so a bit like the HIMARS. They get ammunition for that. 5,000 rounds of 155mm artillery shells. So now that's interesting. So we just heard that they're firing about 3,500 a day, which is not enough. So 5,000 is a day and a half's worth of rounds, which is they need that. Of course, they need that. But 5,000 sounds like a lot. It's actually not a lot. They just need more of that every single day. Again, so to continue, 4 mobile antenna mast systems, 500 SFP9 pistols, 2 hangar tents, 2 forklifts. And then they've pledged additional missiles for the Iris-T surface-to-air missile system. That's a very capable surface-to-air missile system, part of their air defenses. 5,330 155 mil artillery rounds for the Panzerhützer 2000. So again, more artillery rounds to add to that. So they've pledged more, and they will need to continue pledging more. Everyone will need to continue pledging more of these rounds, as I've talked about. Right, this is great. Belgium is starting to step up a little bit more. For my Belgian viewers, and I know I have a few of you, they're sending 240 Volvo military trucks to Ukraine. Some people might go, whoa, they're not tanks. They need these big time, right? Tanks are useless if they can't get delivered shells, etc., etc. So these tanks are super useful. They're also sending 100 trainers with these as well. So the first of the cargo models, lifting vehicles and breakdown trucks will arrive next week. So different variations of these will all be super useful. The trucks could come in handy, during Ukraine's counteroffensive expected to start in late May. I repeated during the latest Ramstein meeting that we will provide all possible support and will continue to do so. In addition to the delivery of trucks, we will also deploy 100 Belgian instructors, said the Minister of Defense, Ludovine de Donde. really good news, and they are calling out for those, so that's fantastic. Sweden has announced it's going to send 8 archers. Archers are fantastic self-propelled artillery systems. They previously hadn't said how many they're going to send. It turns out it's going to be 8. They're actually giving the UK 14, slightly older ones, as a kind of stopgap because we've given all our AS90s pretty much to Ukraine, uh, and so we need something to help us, you know, stop that gap. I think they might have been due to be going to Norway, but Norway cancelled an order or something like that. So anyway, we're getting a bunch of archers too. So cool. Minister for the Armed Forces of France, Le Cornu, confirmed that the first AMX 10 RC, these are the 6-wheeled light tanks, some people call them, uh, that they have given, or they are giving, I think 30 to 40 to begin with, but might be as much as 100 in total. Ukrainian tankers are finishing training in France on these vehicles. The first ones are already there in Ukraine. So fantastic. Thomas Tyner says solution to the shell hunger is to send 100,000 cluster munition carrying artillery shells. This gives Ukraine more artillery ammo and also better ammo to stop Russian infantry attacks, and this in turn preserves Ukrainian manpower. DPICM are superb and perfectly legal. So America uses these; they're not signed up to not using them. I believe Ukraine has had some of these already from Turkey, and they are using them. But the idea that we can't make ammunition, we can't make artillery ammunition quickly enough, allies of Ukraine, should surely be a really good argument for sending over cluster munitions, where the US has an absolute shed load of these warehouses full of this stuff. So I'm pretty sure there's lots of elbow room to give this stuff. Deadliest F-16 pilot known, retired US Lieutenant Colonel Dan Two Dogs Hampton, awesome, said that he is ready to fight in Ukraine on a private contract. I talked to you previously about this. So there was an article that came out saying one of the solutions to providing air support is not to give planes to Ukraine, but for private contractors to put together like their own private military, like a mercenary group of pilots and planes. And since the US has been sort of subcontracting out, offloading some of the training of their pilots to these private entities, they have the capability and capacity to actually provide fighting squadrons that can go out to Ukraine and solve the issue of providing hardware of aircraft to Ukraine. So here we have one guy saying, yeah, he's ready to do that. He would come out of retirement to do that. I think that's quite interesting. Within a few days, a new US aid package will be announced, a response to the Reaper downing. I I hope this is the case, and it looks like it could be, because I don't think this was due to be announced, this military package. Maybe it was, I don't know. Uh, but it could be a response to the Reaper going down, the US going, yeah, we've been a bit. Some people have been accusing them of being weak in public on their response to the Reaper being down. I think it's a really difficult line that they've got to to walk there, and I think the best response would be something like this, if it is what I hope it's going to be, which is like, yeah, we're going to give Ukraine a bunch of stuff. Oh, it turns out they've got 8 ATACMS in there now. Who knew? Don't mess with our drones. That kind of thing, I think it will be the best response, and fingers crossed. But either way, that an aid package will be very useful for Ukraine, no matter what it is. The German tank manufacturer Rheinmetall will likely make the decision to build a tank factory in Ukraine within the next 2 months, said Rheinmetall's CEO. So this is something I talked about a few weeks back. They've been playing around with this idea of building a tank factory that could make up to 400 Panther tanks. So this is a new Rheinmetall tank, which may be the most advanced tank in the world. And I presume it'll be an underground factory, so it can't get hit with missiles. But yeah, be fascinating if they decide to actually do that. There must be some huge risks involved. One of the biggest loan programs in the history of the IMF is in the making for Ukraine. Fantastic, great to see them get their hands on some money. The only thing I worry about these situations is what are the strings attached. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So if the IMF are giving a bunch of money to Ukraine, which they need, of course they need, but you wonder how tied down they're going to be. But I don't see any other way around this, right? Money has to come from somewhere, and no one's just going to give phenomenal amounts of money away for free, right? So I'm hoping it'll be as kinder loans as you can possibly get. The small print, but there will be some element of Ukraine being tied down with these for a long time to come. Um, but that's the nature of rebuilding, right? Uh, Trade and customs data between June and December 2022 showed that Chinese companies have exported 1,000 assault rifles and other equipment such as drone parts and body armor to Russian entities, Politico has reported. Oh dear. Is that evidence of China trying to push a boat, see what they can get away with, and see if the floodgates will open? I hope the floodgates don't open, because that's the only way Russia have of prevailing in this war, in my opinion. Right, now onto geopolitics, and I'm afraid, well, the first bit, this won't annoy people. So the Dutch pro-Russia party, apart from maybe Russians, FVD, whose leader described Putin as a great hero in August 2022, so that was during the war, lost 10 of the 12 seats it attained in 2019 in the 2023 Dutch provincial elections. So it'd be interesting. I know I've got some Dutch viewers. Be interesting what your opinion on this is. I know very little about Dutch politics, but it's interesting that they have taken a really big hit as being the most pro-Russian party. So that doesn't sell well particularly in the Netherlands. I don't know the rest of Europe, but pro-Russian politics might be on the wane. Right, this might annoy you. I'm not picking on Trump. However, this is possibly one of the most egregious things I've heard from any major politician in the world recently. So if you're pro-Trump, just hang on, just listen to this, because if you're pro-Ukraine and pro-Trump, something's got to happen here. This is a real problem. So I was interested when Phillips O'Brien, who I follow, I think is brilliant, said Trump has certainly given Putin his money's worth, and people are going, but the real question is, what does Putin have on Trump? What does compromat mean? All this kind of stuff. So people are starting to talk about that kind of idea again. Why? What's he said? Well, actually, this is really, really, really dodgy. So I'm going to play this in its. Oh goodness, come on, fingers. Make it a bit louder, so hopefully you can hear this. Right, this goes alongside what he said in Helsinki those years back when he was with Putin, when he took Putin's word over his own intelligence agencies, and that was one of those landmark watershed moments for me in the Trump presidency, where I was like, there is a problem here. There's a really big problem here. Either you are compromised, or you're so besotted with strongmen leaders that you are basically saying treasonous things. He's basically saying, I don't believe the CIA, FBI. I do believe Putin. We just sat down and I believe him. And he said that in that press conference in Helsinki, and everyone's jaws just dropped. Like, you what? And I think that, and the Kurds, what he did with the Kurds, like in foreign policy terms, was the two worst moments of his leadership. This is a shocker. This is a shocker.
At home, the State Department, the defense bureaucracy, the intelligence services, and all of the rest need to be completely overhauled and reconstituted to fire the deep staters and put America first. We have to put America first.
So just to get this straight, he's saying we should basically fire a load of people in the Department of Defense, get rid of defense. It needs to be America first. Okay, what's going to happen? So you're going to get rid of loads of the military, leadership, and these deep staters. Why is this?
Finally, we have to finish the process we began under my administration of fundamentally reevaluating NATO's purpose and NATO's mission. Our foreign policy establishment keeps trying to pull the world into conflict with a nuclear-armed Russia based on the lie that Russia represents our greatest threat.
So he's saying we need to basically dismantle NATO because it's a lie that Russia's our greatest threat. Okay, so what is your greatest threat? What's your greatest threat? If it's not Russia, is it China? Maybe it's China. And maybe that's right, actually. So it'd be interesting to see where he's going to go.
The greatest threat to Western civilization today is not Russia. It's probably, more than anything else, ourselves and some of the horrible USA hating people that represent us at home.
Ourselves. The greatest threat to the US is ourselves. So he's saying, right, we're going to get rid of the Department of Defense people. We're going to overhaul the government, get rid of deep staters. We're going to dismantle NATO, and China's not our biggest threat. We're our own biggest threat. We are our biggest threat to ourselves. He's saying that in the middle of a war with Russia. It's just, I don't know why you would say this. I don't know why you would say this unless there's compromise on you, or unless you're being so badly advised that your whole worldview is just completely warped. I just don't know. Anyway, an exclusive has come out today in The Guardian that is also pretty. I don't know if this is connected at all, but this is pretty worrying. Right. So I don't know if you know. So Trump Media, which is the organization that owns Truth Social, which is his answer to Twitter. So he got banned from Twitter, went to Truth Social, and it turns out, well, I'll just read you this. Top executives at Donald Trump's social media company started to become concerned last spring about $8 million they had accepted from opaque entities in 2 emergency loans when its auditors sought further details about the payments, according to documents, emails, and sources familiar with the matter. The payments had come at a crucial time for Trump Media, which runs the Truth Social platform, because it was running out of cash after its planned merger with a blank check company known as DWAC, that would have unlocked $1.3 billion in capital stalled pending an SEC investigation. So Truth Social was, I don't even remember, it was really scrambling around for money. It was going to basically not happen, and it really needed money. And suddenly it got $8 million. So, but the financing, which came in the form of a $2 million loan from an entity called Paxson Bank, registered in Dominica in December 2021, and a $6 million loan from an entity called ES Family Trust in February 2022, had been arranged in a hurry, and Trump Media knew next to nothing about the emergency lenders. The executives had good reason to be concerned. A subsequent examination revealed that the trustee of ES Family Trust was simultaneously a director of Paxson Bank, and one of the other part owners of the bank would turn out to be the relation of an ally of the Russian President Vladimir Putin. And so it goes on to sort of talk about this. According to documents and emails reviewed by The Guardian and interviews with multiple people familiar with the payments, the knowledge about the $8 million being potentially problematic stretched across a number of top executives at Trump Media. So they knew that this was potentially problematic, and no one really knew where this money was coming from. But in the end, they didn't give it back. It was also unclear whether Orlando, a licensed SEC broker-dealer, or the auditor, BF Borges, completed any due diligence under anti-money laundering and know your customer requirements that mandate vetting of investors to combat the proliferation of illicit money. So they didn't do the proper due diligence. They got $8 million just at a point when they desperately needed it. Then there's emails to confirm that they were worried about this, they were talking about this, but then they kind of didn't do anything about it. And Wilkerson, someone involved, recanted the money was not returned. And by the time that his attorneys, Patrick Mincy, Stephen Bell, and Phil Brewster, alerted the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District in New York to the payments on 23rd of October 2022, the links to a Putin ally were evident. Now, I don't know how strong the links are to this Putin ally, but they've suddenly got $8 million. They still don't really know where that came from. And this allowed them to, stay afloat, emergency loans. But I would be interested to see how that develops, what other stuff can be found out regarding that. But I don't know if that affects why he has this kind of opinion here. But this is really worrying. Even I'm not Trump bashing, but like if any politician, if Rishi Sunak came out and said what he said, I would be absolutely, or Keir Starmer, it's probably more accurate. So if Keir Starmer, the Labour leader in UK, who's the opposition leader, came out and said that, I would be writing articles, slagging him off, and I would be not voting Labour, like just 100%. Like if the leader of the party I was wanting to vote for, was essentially attacking my own country and siding with Russia, I would be having huge problems. And then you listen to things like this, right? This is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I know is on the fringe in the GOP, but she, or the Republican Party in America, but this is dangerous rhetoric. So again, this is dangerous rhetoric here, but also deeply ignorant.
We're paying for a war, a proxy war with Russia, when I've never seen Putin actually show in any detail his plans to invade Europe. No one has shown me that. So I don't believe the lies that I'm being told about this.
Does she not know Ukraine's in Europe?
We're paying for a war.
We're paying for a war against Russia, and I've got no information at all that Putin. It's all lies about him planning on attacking Europe. Dude, Ukraine is in Europe. Like, I think she may be getting the EU confused with Europe, or she's just deeply ignorant, right? So Russia and Ukraine are geographically in Europe. So Ukraine is a country in Eastern Europe. It's the second largest European country after Russia. There you go. So it's all lies about these plans to attack Europe. He's attacked Europe. It's been happening for a year. Europe has been attacked. Why do you think all these European nations are going, oh my God, we need to do something? Why do you think Poland is cacking itself? So maybe she's like, her idea of, maybe she's got such a facile view of understanding of the world that she thinks the EU is Europe. But actually, do you know what? If the UK is not in the EU anymore, so if we were attacked by Russia, would that not be attacking Europe? It's just so you start these kind of things really make me worry. Now, I know there's a lot of competent politicians in America on both sides. There is huge bipartisan support for, and that's what gives me hope for the support for Ukraine, and that's fantastic. But the more people are allowed to voice their opinions, something called the mere exposure effect. The more people say these things, the more reasonable and credible it becomes, and the more people believe them. It's a problem. Trump's speech there is a problem. End of. That is a problem. Anyway, that's the news for today. Sorry to rant at the end. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Check out my Frontline update video that should be coming out soon. And sorry, this was yet again another long one. Speak to you soon.